Rob Zombie once said, 100 years from now, nobody's going to be talking about Dr. Zhivago, but I guarantee you they're going to be talking about Dawn of the Dead. Let's review the George Romero classic. And the A in George A. Romero stands for fucking awesome.
When there's no more room in hell, the dead will walk the earth.
Dawn of the Dead stars David M.G. Kinfery, Scott H. Reiniger, Galen Ross, and is directed by the great, the late George Romero. 1978's Dawn of the Dead is easily considered one of the most important films in horror history. It's one of the most mentioned films when you open a discussion about horror films. Two, I think, dyed-in-the-wool horror enthusiasts. It's just a movie that's so loved by generations, you know, and George Romero is the master. What he created with Night of the Living Dead laid the groundwork, set the template for the zombie subgenre. How do you create a sequel to a movie that's that important? Dawn of the Dead did it, and it's amazing what he was able to pull off with this movie. Not only following up a movie that's not easy to follow up, but a movie that creates its own vision, has its own voice, and it's in a completely different setting. And I think that's what you want to do in a sequel. Do you have something to say? That's the only time you should make a sequel. And that's why George Romero made this movie, because he definitely had something to say. He always has something to say with his films. But going into this, of course, this will be a spoiler review. This is a movie that's over 40 years old. And anytime I do catalog titles, I do spoilers anyway. And, I could say if you haven't seen Dawn of the Dead, then you're crazy. But it's a movie that I saw maybe 5-6 years ago, something like that. And many of you know I saw Night like a couple years ago, thanks to Drewski McGillicuddy. I've just never been, on the George Romero bandwagon. Not his fault at all. It's just one of those directors that was not in my line of sight. I was always following Carpenter and Craven and all these other guys. And Romero is easily just as important. He is on the Mount Rushmore of horror directors. Just watching Night and Dawn alone qualifies him for that title. And by the way, it's not easy reviewing a movie that is A, extremely important, B, has probably been reviewed quite a few times, so what do you say? But I thought, you know what? I am a kind of a newer viewer, that rhymes, of this movie, so why not give a fresh perspective, of my thoughts on this movie? Because I've watched it probably a good 4 or 5 times now. I even watched the Argento cut because I own that cut as well. And just recently, I was finally able to land the Second Sight edition that is all you need, because it contains 3 versions of the movie. You get the theatrical cut, you get an extended cut, and you get the Argento cut all in one. So, man, I cannot recommend this enough. Good luck finding it, because now I think it's out of print again. It's one of those titles, for some strange reason, that it's released and immediately it's bought up and then goes out of print. I don't know what it is about this movie. It's strange, but yeah, that's how it is. But before we walk through the movie, let's do a little backstory on this. As we all know, Night of the Living Dead came out. There's a good 10-year gap between Night and Dawn. And that's just because George was making other films along the way. He wasn't really thinking about a sequel right away for Night of the Living Dead. But then he did get some pressure. There's a lot of people that loved Night of the Living Dead. It wasn't an immediate hit, but it's one of those movies that gradually caught on, especially in other countries. And eventually it bled back over here into America, and people finally realized that, wow, this is a very important film. And when Night of the Living Dead was made, there was nothing like it. And sometimes when there's nothing like a certain movie that comes out, if you don't have the right marketing, then it might not land immediately. But eventually, those types of films do land. But then all of a sudden, one day, George Romero, he's looking for ideas. How do you do another zombie movie? to follow up night, and he actually was in a mall, and he was thinking, wow, this would be a great place to set a zombie film, and it's a great place to make a statement, about society and how we're so materialistic with everything. And that's part of the reason that the zombies end up there, is because I guess in their subconscious, what do they know? They know shopping, and they know selfishness, and so they end up going to where their subconscious leads them, which is the mall. And also, George Romero is one of those directors that likes to pull in his family, people that he knows. It's almost a family effort when he makes his films, and you can see that. You can see the love behind the lens, the passion. It's all there, and it seems like everybody's having a great time. And I spent a good couple days just kind of researching this movie, and because that's something that just stuck out to me. He shot the movie in Pennsylvania, and it's freezing cold, but everybody just was so eager to pitch in and lend a hand and offer their input. And Romero's just that type of director that welcomes any kind of input. He's not so full of himself. Some have even said that he's like one of the nicest directors to work for. So I think that's part of that legacy too. When you have a director that's that talented, but also just a very friendly, kind person to the people that work under him, he's not full of himself. It doesn't hurt the legacy whatsoever. So anyway, jumping into the movie, this movie really starts with chaos. They're at the news station, and it's just pandemonium. We are well into the zombie apocalypse, I guess you would call it, and everybody's freaking out. The people that are supposed to be put together and organized and all that stuff, the educated, they seem to be freaking out the most. They don't know how to deal with this.
It gets up and kills. The people it kills get up and kill.
And it's a great way to start a movie. It's really chaotic, just to let the viewer know what type of world this is. People don't really have a plan. And so the plan is kind of being orchestrated along the way, and it's kind of told through the eye of these worker bees, These two guys from the SWAT team, Peter and Roger, along with this couple, this pilot Steven and his girlfriend Fran. Romero is known for his gore. This movie, when it first came out, it did not have a rating. Romero didn't want to cut any corners as far as the gore, because that was part of the statement. And the scene in the apartment complex at the beginning, you have this like SWAT team shootout and everything. You have tons of zombies in the building, and especially in the basement, you see them all sitting there just kind of feeding on each other. And behind the scenes, Ken Faree and Scott Reiniger, they were talking about when they walked into that scene, it was pretty jarring, and they felt almost sick to their stomach. That's the climate on set. Yeah, Romero's this great, friendly guy, but when it comes to his vision, he's not holding back at all. He's not pulling any punches. And I think that it's right there on the actors' faces. Some of it's not even acting. They're like, holy shit. And really, this scene has some of the greatest Carnage Candy type scenes too, with the head exploding. The shotgun, he shoots him and his head freaking explodes. But the scene that always sticks out to me the most is, I believe it's a husband-wife, and he's it looks like he's trying to hold her, and then he takes a bite out of her shoulder. And I don't care how many times I've seen this movie, that leaves a mark. I'm like, oh my God. That's the great thing about doing zombie movies, because they're pretty much cannibals. And Romero puts it all on display. It's not an off-camera type of thing. It's not like theater of the mind. Yeah, theater of the mind's great and everything, and we all like to form our own little horror stories in our head, but why not put it right there on display in front of the viewer? You don't even have to think about it. Here it is. That's what Romero does. Fuck yeah. There's a line in the movie that Peter says, when there's no more room in hell, the dead will walk the earth.
When there's no more room in hell, the dead will walk the earth.
And this scene right here is like the perfect representation of that. It literally looks like hell in this apartment complex. And I'm not talking visually from fire breathing, all that stuff. I'm just talking about everybody can kind of form their own version of hell in their head. And this could definitely be a version of hell, seeing people just eating each other in a basement. Creepy stuff. So eventually, Steven, Peter, Roger, and Fran, they get in this helicopter and they end up at this mall, which is where the rest of the movie takes place. And what's great about just spending a good amount of time in one location is it does give you a chance to slow down and get to know the characters a little bit. And the characters are very well fleshed out in this movie. And I think that's a big reason why Dawn really stands the test of time. First off, Peter and Roger. This is easily one of the best like on-screen friendship chemistry situations I've ever seen. Like, they work so well off of each other. You can tell that they're just having a blast coming up with different scenarios just to showcase how great these two get along. But they're not the same type of person. You know, Peter's more of like a military-minded type of person, a little bit more serious, whereas Roger, who's a very capable soldier, but he's just so cocky and eager to win and full of himself.
Hey, too tall, too slow, too. Come in.
You look my size when you're sitting in the truck.
Not in a bad way, but you know, his mindset is I can't lose no matter what, and that's kind of his downfall later in the movie. No matter what the opposition is, I can overcome it, you know? In a situation where it seems like there's no way they're gonna get out of this. And by the way, the original ending of this movie was that nobody survived. But in Roger's mind, oh, we're gonna win. There's no doubt about it. Losing is not an option. But there's so many great scenes with these two. I'd say they are the comic relief. And just to sidestep over into Argento's version, it's a much more serious version. Argento was a big fan of Romero, and Romero actually went over to Italy. You know, Argento put him up in this really nice hotel and everything, and he wrote Dawn in Italy. But when he got done, there were going to be two different versions of the movie. Argento was going to edit his own version, and Romero was going to edit his own version. And so it's nice because you have the more serious tone in the Argento cut, and then you have the director's true vision, which doesn't leave anything out. And there are some scenes that are lighthearted, and that's because of Peter and Roger. I much prefer the theatrical version of the movie. I don't mind the comedy in here. I mean, Romero's even stated that this is kind of a comics type story. You know, the comedy lends itself to the story, and sometimes it makes those more intense, scary situations stick out. You know, it's almost like a left hook. You're like, oh shit, I didn't expect that. And a great example of that is the scene like in the middle of the movie where Roger and Peter, they're in this truck, and Roger, he's trying to hotwire it. And there's some nice, funny, lighthearted moments in that section of the movie because of Roger and how they kind of bicker with each other a little bit. But then, you know, they are like attacked and overcome by zombies, and then it goes from lighthearted to oh shit in like a second. I like stuff like that. And that is like one of the best scenes in the movie, honestly. That is the scene where Roger gets bitten. And so then it becomes a situation where like, oh shit, I'm gonna die. Roger knows he's going to die. And just before he got bit, he thought, I'm invincible. There's no way I can lose. You know, it's a reality gut punch. But then you got Fran and Steven, which are also interesting in their own right. They're a little bit more like well-to-do. Steven's a pilot. He's not a military-minded person at all. So he's the guy that's forced to take a stand, pick up a gun, and fight to save his girlfriend, Fran. And just imagine you're not like a guy that's used to guns, you've never held a gun before, and you're thrust in a situation where you have zombies coming after you, trying to eat you, and you have to fight. And David M.G. does a great job of just showcasing that vulnerability throughout, and you know, being just unsure of himself. He's kind of a klutz at times, but he's willing to stand up and just try and do the best he can. And there's quite a few times where, you know, Roger or Peter have to step in and save him. So I think all four of these characters kind of play off of each other very well. And then you got Fran, who is actually pregnant. And there is like a controversial scene in this where Peter basically says, do we want to abort it? Do we want to go ahead and kill the baby now?
Maybe she needs a doctor or something.
We can deal with it. Doesn't change a thing. You want to get rid of it?
That's some crazy stuff, and that's stuff that we probably wouldn't see today as much, or, you know, I think writers would probably rethink a scene like that in a movie like this, because would it be necessary? To Romero, it was definitely necessary. Romero liked to push buttons and play with controversial themes in his movies. Even in Night of the Living Dead, he touches on subjects like civil rights. And this is a time where that was a very controversial subject, you know, to stick your head out, to make a black guy your main character. Romero did that because most of his friends were of different races and nationalities. He wasn't racist. He didn't care about that stuff. And it's an issue that cropped up in society, you know, outside of the movies. Also, Tom Savini. I mean, this was one of his first big jobs in Hollywood. You know, Romero just let him play, let him do whatever he wanted to do. You know, you're the guy that's gonna take care of the kills in this movie. So go hog wild, do whatever you want. And boy, does he go hog wild. Savini served in Vietnam, and he stated that basically he wanted his kills to feel real because that's what he saw in Vietnam. He was a photographer in Vietnam. And so he used that experience to make his work as realistic as possible. You know, that was his bar. And it definitely comes across on screen. There are scenes in this movie that are definitely not for the squeamish. It's not a gratuitous movie, though. The story is front and center, but it just so happens the story involves dead people that are cannibalistic. And of course, you're going to have a lot of blood and guts in situations like that. And in the mall, when the zombies are running amok, there's a scene where Savini plays this biker, and the biker gang, they get in the mall, and then it becomes a situation where our heroes are not only fighting zombies, but they're also fighting the biker gang. So they kind of use the zombies to their own benefit to take down the biker gang. Those are probably the most gruesome scenes in the movie, when you see people laying down and the zombies are eating them and their intestines are being pulled out. Still to this day, I think some of the most effective and graphic kill effects out there. Now let's talk about the zombies a little bit. This is one of the most unique movies in terms of just how the zombies look. If you watch the movie, you'd swear they're blue. But Savini states that he painted them gray. But on film, it came across as blue, sometimes green. And I like a zombie movie that the zombies have a lot of personality. And you have a nurse zombie in this. You have this zombie with his shirt off that's highly overweight that rolls into the pond, the fountain. You have what's called, I guess, the screwdriver zombie, where Roger's attacked by this zombie and he thrusts this screwdriver right in his freaking ear. Just fun stuff like that. And of course, we're going to talk about Flyboy Zombie here in a minute, who is Steven. But, Romero, he didn't really give anybody any direction as far as the zombies go. He said, you know what? Make it your own. Figure out what you think you would do if you were dead and then you were walking the earth. And that's why the zombies have a lot of variety in this movie. And you can tell that the actors were just really into the part. Or I guess extras, not actors. These are people that would work 16 hours a day. And they were just having a blast. They would literally walk off set in their zombie getup and not even take it off. They would go through the next day and just to have fun with it, and just to scare the neighbors and all that stuff, that's probably what I would do too. That'd be cool. Now, we got to talk about Flyboy Zombie, because I think Flyboy is one of the most important zombies in zombie history. And I think that's because of David MG's performance. As a matter of fact, I actually just posted this on Killer Flicks. Who's the better zombie? Is it Flyboy or is it Tarman from Return of the Living Dead? And Flyboy's definitely getting his votes in here. It's kind of half and half right now. And the guy who played Tarman, this was a guy that was very physical with his performance, very thin and lanky. And David MG, he knew he was going to have to be a zombie in the movie. And he wanted to make it special, to do something with the part. It's like the thing that he was looking forward to the most as an actor. And boy, does he freaking nail this performance. And he's easily the scariest zombie of the bunch. But the walk that he did, you could swear that he was going to fall over. He turns his foot almost 45 degrees to one angle. And this stuttering walk throughout. And then it's all accented by when he gets through, all the zombies are coming up, and you have Fran and Peter has to shoot him. And when he shoots him, it's just glorious. It's like Romero Carnage Magic. Hashtag Romero Carnage Magic. And there's just this blood spatter that goes behind his head against the wall. Now in this movie, Roger, of course, he's bitten, and we're just waiting for him to become a zombie. And it's sad because this is Peter's best friend at this point. And so he has to wait at the end of the bed for Roger to finally become a zombie, and then he has to kill him. And so this is where it feels like all hope is gone. How are they going to beat this? And you have Fran and Peter, and they're holed up at the upper level of the mall, in the room that they're all staying in. I was talking earlier about the end of this movie. Originally, Fran was going to kill herself by basically sticking her head up into the propeller of the helicopter. Peter was going to shoot himself in the head. They never even shot those scenes. Luckily, Romero's wife talked him into actually making kind of a happy ending, a hopeful ending. Not really a happy ending, but a hopeful ending, because they fly off and then that's the end of the movie. And even the music in that scene, it's a little bit more uplifting. And I think it's the right ending for the movie, actually, that there is a small glimmer of hope in this. And I didn't really talk about Galen Ross, who played Fran, that much. And one thing I definitely wanted to mention in this review is how great her performance was, and how interesting is that this was her first movie. She wasn't really an actor at all. She ended up just getting the part. And when she went into this, she stated she was scared to death. Like, I've never been in, like, not only a movie, but like a movie that's at this level, like freaking George Romero, who did Night of the Living Dead, and I'm gonna be in the sequel to that movie. That's a lot of pressure. And so she actually went to this like acting coach every day before she actually went on set, and would just kind of, ask the acting coach, how do I approach this scene? What should I do? And that helped her through the process quite a bit. And I think she turns in a great performance. And I often like when an actor that has no experience ends up getting a big role, because it often leaves a memorable performance. I mean, you can take like Edward Furlong in Terminator 2. That's a very memorable performance because, he had never acted before in his life. And so it's just different, it's different than somebody that's just like classically trained. So anyway, guys, the legend of Dawn of the Dead. This movie is so freaking important. I stated that at the beginning of the review. I was a little intimidated to review the movie just because of how important it is. It feels epic. It feels big. It doesn't feel like every other, not only zombie movie, but just horror movie in general. It stands on its own. And it's a labor of love. It's crafted so well. It has amazing characters. And it's just got an interesting soundtrack too. There's some lighthearted moments in the movie that have some playful music. And then there's some very serious music, provided by Goblin, which is also unique. You have an Italian band providing the score for this movie. So there's just so much to love about Dawn of the Dead. The rating that I would give Dawn of the Dead in a freaking heartbeat is a unicorn. It is such an important film, and it backs it up. It's very well done. I think it still holds up to this day. Yes, there are definitely some dated moments in the movie, but that just kind of adds to the charm, if you ask me. It's a gift. It's a gift that Romero has given all of us, and just rest in peace, good sir. It sucks that he's gone, but man, he left us with some wonderful films. So anyway, guys, in the comments, let me know your thoughts on Dawn of the Dead. Looking forward to hearing them. Also, be sure to come over to Killer Flicks, where we talk horror all day and every day, and on Fridays, we do Free For All Fridays. Follow me at Drumdums on all my socials. Support me on Patreon, buy me a coffee. And remember, when there's no room left in hell, the dead will walk the earth.